Schwartz. I'm the CEO of TBWA Shaite here in New York, and I'm a proud 3% man ambassador. I think it's great that 3% is hosting this event here in New York. After all, New York is the birthplace of original mad women like Phyllis Robinson, Mary Wells, and of course, Sterling Cooper's Peggy Olson. Laugh at any time you would like, people. My God. The 3%, serious conference here. People get uptight with diversity, don't they?
It's serious.
All right. Anyway, I'm personally very invested in this conference. My grandmother was a working mother. My mom was a working mother. I met my wife, a fellow creative. She was a working mother. And now I've got a daughter at the University of Michigan. She's a sophomore, and I feel like we've only got 2 years to get this work balance thing right. So let's go. Chop, chop. TBWA is a proud sponsor of 3%, and you should know that this event has truly electrified and galvanized our network. At last year's conference, after last year's conference, we launched what we're calling Project 2020. This is a TBWA commitment to increase senior female leadership roles throughout our global network. It's 11,000 offices all over the world. We're trying to increase female leadership by 20%. So it's very ambitious in a lot of places, not just here in the States, but everywhere in the world. And also through this program, we started initiatives in each of our 190 offices, and we're trying to bring awareness to the issues and give people a forum to create change, spark conversation about achieving a balanced workplace. Oh, here are all the people coming in late. You missed all the good jokes. We're wrapping up now. All right, don't worry, relax. Anyway, there's no creating change or balance in the workplace if you aren't first getting the right diverse talent in the door, which leads us to today's most excellent panel. Look, these guys are ready. You guys look very smart.
We got two ambassadors. Two man ambassadors.
That's right, two man ambassadors. Yay, testosterone. Anyway, today's panel will discuss the issues and answer some of the tough questions around diversity and recruiting. Guys, take it away. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it. My name is Leslie Ann Ruiz. I'm an Associate Director for Talent Acquisition at AKQA. Quick show of hands. Who here is a talent acquisition professional? Recruiter, HR, headhunter? Fantastic. All right. So who here works in marketing or advertising or creative in general? Fantastic. And is there anyone here from tech companies? You know, Google, Facebook, Apple? Raise your hand, Melissa. All right. So this is the third 3% conference I've attended. And it's definitely been a cause that's near and dear to my heart. And AKQA, they're going to hate me. I've been there for several years now, and I definitely have diversity and inclusion, inclusion in mind, but it's still a challenge trying to find the right talent. And sometimes my hiring managers, the GCDs, the ECDs, they come up to me and they say things like, "Where are all the women candidates?" And I don't have binders full of women in my back pocket. I'm sourcing and I'm searching just like everyone else. And I brought up some of these issues to Kat, and she agreed that a lot of times when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, where are we supposed to get these candidates? If 3% to 11% of the creative directors in North America are female, if we just keep hiring and looking for creative directors, that ends up just being a bit of a shell game. So she put together this fantastic panel of experts to help address some of these questions, because I have been thinking about this topic for years now, and it's still a struggle and a challenge to have something actionable and allow my hiring managers to either change our approach or come up with a new strategy. And so I really wanted this panel to be a way that we can walk away from here and learn some new tools, some new tips, and some insights on what we can do.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Slavich, and I manage diversity and inclusion at Square. I'm based in San Francisco. For those of you who don't know what Square is, it's actually downstairs in the lobby, that little white credit card reader that you plug into your phone. But we have a bunch of tools for small businesses to help them start, run, and grow their business. And half of all the businesses on Square are owned by women, so this is something very near and dear to our hearts. One of the things that is my current frustration is getting past the referral. It's still 30% of our hires, which is actually lower than I think other companies, and we don't have bonuses, which is I think is a good thing. but there's still, statistically, your referral network is statistically going to look like yourself. And so until we're diverse, we're going to keep hiring more people like ourselves. One thing that we do well at Square is our leadership team is 40% diverse, and our board of directors is 33%, which is higher than the industry. They're also super talented individuals and role models for the whole company. So we're doing really well at the top, and now we're trying to work through the middle.
Thanks. My name is Jenny Tiemann. I'm Associate Director of Creative Recruiting for RGA in New York, so sort of run all of the creative recruiting there and across sort of also the region. I would say at RGA we have a really great culture of sort of like respecting diversity and respecting diverse opinions. We do have a lot of women, so this isn't one of my successes, but we have sort of Chris Kiger and Chloe Gottlieb, who are women that have been at RGA for over 13 years, both of them, and have sort of progressed and grown there. So it's really shown that that's, sort of a path for women there. I have a lot of candidates that bring them up, and so it's a great sort of example that you can sort of grow and you can be seen as you can go sort of in the managing direction or sort of stay hands-on in the work, and there's a path for you. I would say one of our biggest frustrations still, though, is like the cultural fit. Everybody's sort of very concerned with culture fit, and that's great, but it ends up sometimes being incredibly limiting. And I think that we're then sort of always sort of hiring like hires like, and that can be sort of a huge struggle. And I think it's just sort of educating people to sort of get beyond that and sort of see that, like, yes, you might want to hang out with somebody at work and you want that, but they can also be a little bit different than you, and it doesn't have to be sort of exactly the same.
Great. So I wanted to address the idea of employee referrals and culture fit. I've leveraged both a lot in my career. And do you sometimes feel that culture fit can be the antagonist of diversity and inclusion? I know everywhere I've worked, they've always placed a great importance on culture fit. They want people who will fit in, who they can have a beer with, someone who can be their buddy when they're stuck in an airport. They want to be able to build a team. Is this person a culture fit? Can they work with the team? That's such a huge thing, and that definitely leads into the employee referral. The employee referral network at AKQA is massive. I hire so many people. Sometimes I joke that my best recruiting source is other employees, but does that keep perpetuating the lack of diversity in the staff?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say at RGA it has. I think we also do a bunch of referrals, and that's great, and we get really great people. But I think it can be really limiting because you are they're just looking at sort of a very small section of who they've worked with. Vanessa and I were talking about it, that I think we can help educate people that, like, your referrals can go beyond sort of your friends and, like, other people you've worked with, but, like, thinking about, like, oh, who was that amazing, like, woman producer I worked with? It's not necessarily a friend reaching out to you and saying, I saw this designer opening, but maybe like thinking about your network in a different sense and referring people in a different sense. Also trying to really understand that diversity is important and you don't want everybody the same on your team. I think at RGA, people really like respect that and believe it, but there is a little bit of a disconnect when we hire. I think also we get really busy, the teams get really busy, so it's like, oh, this creative director worked with this guy before, that's enough for me. Like, I know that he can do it, and it sort of will hire that person instead of maybe looking a little bit deeper at some of the other candidates. I would say on the flip side, though, sometimes referrals enable people to get in that would have never gotten in the door. If I had showed just that portfolio, the team would be like, no, they're not strong enough. But because this creative director that they respect referred them, it sort of allows them. So if people are referring or sort of thinking about that in a broader way, that might actually be able to, like, sort of help in a different way and not be part of the problem, but part of the solution.
That's a great point.
One of the things that we did is we eliminated culture fit from interview feedback. It's kind of a scapegoat for not like me, and actually define what that means. So, like, why, yes or no, and then define the characteristics. And it's proven that if you come in with, like, these are the 5 things I want for the role, and then you evaluate on those 5 things, and you ask candidates the same set of questions, you can evaluate them equally on the questions. And so you can't just use culture fit to say no, you have to actually define these specific characteristics.
Great. Now, I know at AKQA and at RGA, we don't have someone specifically with the title of diversity and inclusion officer or manager or lead. Can you, Vanessa and Doug, can you tell us a little bit about how your roles came to be and how it's affected your workplace?
Well, my role was created in the summer of 2012. So prior to me getting there, TBWA, and I always give them credit for creating the role. So there was no one full-time doing diversity across our North American network, and they created the role. And they hired me, who had never done diversity formally as a job before. I had worked with Magic Johnson as the head of his ad agency and helped him with new business. And I had also started businesses before. So I was very familiar with the diversity ecosystem, but I had never actually done it as a full-time job. And on my first day, they did something called a disruption day. So essentially, they looked at diversity as what if it was a client? So if diversity actually came to TBWA and said, help me, what would we actually do? And they put a set of planners and creatives and strategy, and they actually created a roadmap that explained that for diversity to be successful, it needed to actually excel in 3 areas at the same time. They had no one currently doing that, so this became the roadmap for my role. And those are the 3 areas of supply chain, so hiring female and diverse business owners, supporting HR, and also encouraging more cultural programs. So if no one's there to do it, it always gets pushed to the bottom of the list, because at the end of the day, we're a client-based business and people have to service their clients. So it ultimately starts with good intentions, but ad agencies are in the idea business and the announcement business. So the execution is really where you have to have someone day to day. So the strategy has worked out well, and I enjoy the role, but that's a little background on how it was started and how it was created.
For me, I've been at Square for 4.5 years. I was at Apple before in recruiting, so I came from the recruiting side of it. And then 3.5 years ago, we pitched the idea for this immersion program called Code Camp for Women in Engineering. And that was directly something we saw was the lack of women in engineering. And we created this 5-day program focused on community, leadership skills, and technical skill development. That was how I started getting really interested and involved in diversity, and then slowly started making it more and more of my job until earlier this year. I was like, I'm going to do this full time. I'm going to either do it here or somewhere else. And I was just talking to Jenny. It's actually a really common role in tech. The smallest company I've heard is 100 people. But in general, tech's taking it really, really seriously. And so there's lots of options for people interested in the space. And I think you can come at it from a recruiting background or a traditional HR kind of inclusion, either the diversity in pipelines, so thinking about recruiting, or the inclusion in the programs and systems and processes. So if you have an expertise in either one of those, it's really easy to roll into the role. And so I basically pitched it and said, this is what I want to do full time. And so I'm working on my plan for next year right now and the goals and targets that we're working towards.
And I hear more and more about more companies creating diversity roles, because it's always the flip side of it. One side is that role counterproductive? Should someone have the title diversity and inclusion in their formal remit? So you have that side of the conversation, and then you have the other side of the conversation, which is more and more companies are creating the role. So Airbnb is creating one. I just saw YouTube is creating the role. We also looked, Dropbox is creating the role. So we did an interview, the Drum called just a few weeks ago, and did an interview with me on the proliferation of chief diversity officers coming up and up. So we all work together in a non-competitive way. So we share resources, we work together. So diversity is a unique industry across the agency side and the brand, where it's non-competitive. So no one's in here trying to really block and tackle. I mean, we all meet together and know one another, and, we all go out to drinks and figure out whose expense account that's going on. No, I'm just kidding, Rob. So, it is a real community, and there is strength in numbers. If everybody has someone, at the party, then when we do events like Ad Color or 3%, you can see the scale, and you can see like-minded people really coming together, and that really builds a movement.
Actually, to add to that too, I'm part of a group it's a diversity advocates group. It's based in San Francisco, but it's 70 different companies who either are in a role like Doug or I, or Jenny, who are just interested in learning more about it. And so it's kind of the range. But we have like monthly meetups and lunches and just cross-idea sharing. So if anyone's interested in joining that, I can share the information after.
Fantastic. Several months ago, I was at Interaction 15, which is the IXDA conference, and there was a panel discussion on recruitment and user experience. And I thought to myself, oh, I hate recruiting for UX. It's such a pain. I'm going to attend this because I wanted to learn something new. And there were 10 people on the panel. 9 of them were guys. There was 1 woman. And what I often heard over and over again was, we know exactly the type of person we want to hire. We know where they've gone to school. We know what types of products they've worked on. We know where they've worked. We've identified the type of person that works well with us, but we just can't find women or people of color that fit that mold. And in my mind, I'm thinking, are you really looking for diversity, or do you just want a woman who thinks exactly like you? And I was wondering if you guys had any ideas or strategies on how to get beyond that. I know oftentimes my creative directors, they'll say things like, oh, we only want people from these 3 other agencies, or who've worked for these 3 companies, or they've worked on these types of products. And that starts to feel very, very limiting. And if we are talking about diversity, not just in appearance, but also in terms of experience, sometimes I don't know how to get that net cast a little wider.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like at RGA there is sort of a deep respect for different, sort of work styles and different work and coming from different places. It surprises me to hear that about experience design, because I feel like there's a lot of women in experience design.
You would have thought differently if you had that panel, yeah.
It's interesting, but I also feel like maybe Chloe Gottlieb used to run our experience design. Now she's sort of head of systems. So maybe that has helped, because it sort of has encouraged other women in the field who sort of see her as a leader, then see RGA. But I think it is a problem of I think there's a deep respect for sort of different work styles and different diversity in work, but sometimes then hiring managers get really limited and sort of, want to see from this agency, or, just see them from CMU. And you do have to sort of sell it a little bit harder with some people that were at this small product place and maybe doing a bunch of things and don't have the sort of deep experience design background that we might want, but they've got this different thinking that would be great. And I think that's partly us sort of educating them, but also hiring managers need to sort of take it seriously too and think about not just sort of diverse in terms of women or people of color, but we're going to make stronger work if we have sort of diverse, different thinking, and all of that's coming together from different industries, and we'll be able to make sort of even more innovative and even better products and better services and better campaigns. But I think it is still sort of a struggle, because I think culturally we sort of have it, but then when we're hiring, it still gets limited, and it still is okay, did they go to this school, or did they work at sort of on another Nike-like beast at another agency, and if they haven't worked on sort of that huge thing, then maybe they can't do that, where they might have done some really innovative stuff for a smaller place.
I have 2 points related to this. And so yesterday on the Ambassador panel, I think Bruce brought it up, but it's potential over credential. So kind of looking at what they can create versus what they have done today. It's probably a blend of the 2. One of the things that we tried this summer was an apprentice program. And it's a 3-month training program for people kind of in transition, or they went to a boot camp program. There's actually companies doing it for design, not just engineering. But it's 3 months where you give them the opportunity to essentially show what they can do with some training and mentoring and skills, and then ideally roll into a full-time position after. And so our hope is that we're still testing all this, but that these will roll into full-time hires. We're focusing on diversity for this program. And so trying to give them the potential piece of it instead of just this is your resume. One of the other things, too, is unconscious bias training. There's a lot of talk about it now. We're rolling it out for all employees. And it's interesting because the person that's leading it is one of our engineering managers, who is a white man, been at Square for 5 years. And then the person that's co-leading it is another white man who runs the orientation program. And for him, Eric, who leads it, he said the turning point for him was that he realized everyone has bias. There's positive and negative, but even an African American person can have bias against another African American person. Like, it's not just white men hate against everyone else, or white women, or whatever it may be. And so that really changed the conversation for him, and it was like, wow, we can really use this as a tool. And then once the mind is open and aware, and all the stats are there, so it's not hard to get the research, then people get engaged in this dialogue, and they're like, okay, well, how can I move past this? And the business case for diversity is easy. There's also tons of stats. And so it's like, okay, the business case is there. Let's all recognize that it's a problem, and we have this, and then let's work towards solutions.
And I actually think, I think recruiting and getting people in the agency is one half of the coin, but I think really the retention part, advertising just historically is, around a 30% turnover rate. So, we're losing so many people to constant, all the time to get new employees in. Then you have to do the exit interview, then get new employees in. This is a huge process. So I think, really it's about focusing on, the decision makers and the executive teams, but also looking at the policies internally to see what we can do to have people stay at the organizations. I always read about the rule of threes. You have to have 3 people on any specific team in order for their voice to really be heard. If you have 1 person on the team, they feel outnumbered. They don't normally speak as much. 2 people on the team, they speak, but they're really not heard. But 3 people on the team starts to build a voice and a movement within that group. So when we go back to our offices, really look at our departments and really say, hey, can we get 3 people that are not part of the majority on each of these teams? And how can we grow and work to increase from those 3 people? And then we can keep our retention numbers at a level that will allow the people that we get in and the people that we bring to middle management to ultimately go to the top and become executive level in one of the 5 to 7 positions at each of our organizations.
Great. A lot of other companies have started publicly stating that they want to hire more women, they want to include more people of color, they want to work with vendors that are women-owned businesses, and I think these are all fantastic, but sometimes it starts to sound like a quota. And I mean, when I was in college, I was all for affirmative action, so that hasn't ever been an issue for me. But how do you portray this so that it doesn't make someone feel like they're suddenly a victim of tokenism? I know if myself or any of the people that I hired felt that they were only hired because they happened to be a woman, or they happened to be brown, or they happened to be black, like that would be crushing. That's a horrible feeling. You want to be hired on your skills and what you bring to the table, not just because you're going to improve a company's diversity numbers. Is there a way that you can, I guess, get the entire company on board with, I guess, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think quotas are sort of a bad idea there as well. I think it does sort of then you're sort of hiring maybe just for that number instead of hiring for that person and their skills, which is the most important part. Again, sort of dealing with all these unconscious bias is going to be really important to change that. I do feel like numbers are good for us to sort of benchmark against and see where we're at and see where we want to go in terms of percentages, and help us, continue to make that sort of an issue and see that okay, we believe in this and we've done this, but it hasn't changed in the last 2 years. Our numbers haven't changed. So what are we not doing right, and what can we do better? I think at RGA we have a lot of sort of organic stuff that happens internally with women and, women's groups. And we have sort of a women's group that we were on an email chain last night. We launched some new work, and they were sort of calling out some of the women developers on this team that led it. And it was really sort of amazing and awesome, especially after being here. But I think it's sort of, I sort of lost my point there. Sorry, lost my point there. But that was awesome. But I think you have to sort of change, again, sort of internally, and those numbers sort of help us continue to make sure that we're doing something. And if we're not, how can we do it better? How can we do more things? What do we need to be doing? Sort of listening to all of these examples and sort of trying to do that internally.
Something we're trying to do, I think it's important to differentiate between quotas and goals. Like, you have to have goals. You have to be able to kind of mobilize resources and work towards something. It doesn't have to be a quota. It's just, where do we want to go? And we have to define that and get an agreement on what that is. And then we can allocate staff accordingly and resources. So actually setting goals, how we're defining it is representation of the U.S. So I'm looking at the U.S. and what does the U.S. workforce look like? And then that's our goal. And I'm defining what number of years that is, but that's our goal. And then how are we going to get there? And it's not a quota, but that's what we're aspiring towards.
I mean, and for me, it's really about, it's really about creativity. So the bottom line of our business is we're making creative messages. Many of them are international. We have to have different opinions from different voices that create the United States economy and the global economy. When we first started our supplier diversity program, we didn't formally have one in place. Most people at the agency were never even had heard of the word. The awareness was relatively low, but clients were calling and saying, hey, how much of the spend that you do on our behalf goes to businesses that are owned by women and businesses that are owned by diverse entrepreneurs? And then another client would call and another client would call. And then before you know it, between DDB, BBDO, TBWA, I mean, we have probably 50 clients that are interested in knowing who we're hiring in our supply chain. So when you look at women-owned businesses, there's 9.4 million women-owned businesses in the United States, and they get less than 3% of all business-to-business transactions. So you're saying that 97% of business-to-business transactions are not going to roughly 30% of all the businesses in America. So then you say, well, who can we hire? Casting directors, set design, producers, translation. These are a lot of people that work in the ad industry and said, hey, I want to go out and start a business. I want to go out because I'm having a family and I don't want to work at an agency. I want to create my own pre-production or storyboard company. So I felt that this was something that we could translate to our producers and creative directors and encourage them to go outside their normal circle of vendors and give, the same services and opportunities. So when we hit $100 million to these 76 businesses, for me, that was very important because the business owners, many of them worked in advertising and they needed the same opportunity on that side of the coin. Now the producers and creatives understand what we're doing. Now it's easier to talk to them about, but look at your team. Now it's easier to go internally because we started out with something that was external. So I think the conversation over time evolves, but we have to first get everybody on the same page to where we had to start from.
Right. Now, sort of speaking about getting people on the same page, we've mentioned unconscious bias during this conversation. Sometimes when I'm presenting candidates, my hiring managers will say things like, I don't look at the gender, I look at the work. And I think that's great. I think that's solid. But sometimes the way that they look at the work and their definition of what good work is influenced by a long history of Swedish guys. Back when I was in college, I was an art history major. And this one culture critic that I was a fan of, Dave Hickey, he wrote, bad taste is real taste, good taste is the residue of another person's privilege. Which I always thought was really pithy. But what I have to ask is, how are ways that we could sort of start to expand what is considered good work? Because if we just kept going with what is normally considered good work, we wouldn't really get anywhere. And also, I'm tired of having these conversations with my hiring managers where they feel like I'm attacking them and they're trying to say, no, I'm just looking at the work. I'm not looking at the gender or the ethnicity. And I get that. I know on the surface they're not, but there's little triggers for them on what they consider good, but it always ends up mapping back to what they were raised with.
No, I mean, I definitely would agree, and I think that that's something that we struggle with as well. We have sort of a global base of creativity and creative directors and designers. I was recently working on a role, and two of the heads are Brazilians, and of course, out of the 5 books, they really gravitated toward the other 2 Brazilians because I think they respect their design. They love that sort of design. And that's, again, sort of just choosing like-minded. And I think it happens with the work as well. I think maybe if we could take a step back and even sort of educate them about their teams and think, okay, you've got these like great Brazilian designers who you love, but like maybe you need, some other sort of like some, Swedish designers or something to balance it out, or other, not even, and try to balance it out and let them know that, like, again, you're going to make a stronger product and a stronger service if you have sort of different kinds of work and different design thinking, and maybe, you had sort of different schools that you pull from. Like, if we only pull from SCAD and SVA, we're always going to have sort of a similar designer, and trying to sort of broaden that horizon too, and think about, what is the makeup of your current team right now, and like, what maybe are you missing there? Like, maybe you need somebody who's a little bit more illustratory. Maybe we can sort of look for that skill set and trying to help them see the bigger picture.
So
and
creating a more
fine-tune it.
robust department as opposed to
just
a lot of the same.
A lot of the same. We also have, I think with Nike as a client, which is a great client, but it often skews a little bit toward the male side of things. And so they end up sort of skewing to other people that maybe have worked on Nike, and then you sort of then skew male again. And it's like a great designer is a great designer, and it doesn't have to be, a man or a woman. And same with like L'Oreal, I think then skews female at RGA. And I don't think those are always helpful things either. You could get sort of more innovative and better creative products and campaigns if you're sort of getting people from different thoughts and different design processes.
Right. One thing that I have sort of seen that has been helpful in conversing with my hiring managers is I think probably using data as opposed to anecdotal evidence. So Vanessa, I know you wrote an article in Medium about using technology to help with diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of new platforms. I'm actually going to an event in a couple weeks. It's 30 different companies that are just focused on bias. And they're starting with the interview process. So from applying online, filtering through, and actually being able to pair candidates based on machine learning instead of kind of intuition. We rewrote all of our job descriptions. There's a couple platforms there, Textio and Unitive. And what they're doing is pairing machine learning as well, looking at gendered tones and then exclusionary tones, acronyms, things like that, and then actually suggesting alternatives to what those are, and then giving you a score out of 100. And they encourage you to put a diversity statement in, and we did an A/B test before and after we rewrote our job descriptions, and we doubled the number of applicants for all of those positions, including men and women. So they're just positive in general by making them more inclusionary. And that's one of the things we're kind of working with. Then there's also like interviewing. There's like blind interviewing software. So there's kind of a lot of tools coming in through the whole pipeline. And then eventually these tools are working towards interview, like performance reviews and interview feedback too. So kind of the actual looking at trends across and then getting data from those pieces.
All right. Yeah. Vanessa and I met last week, and she showed me Textio, and my jaw dropped. I was so impressed. And as I had mentioned earlier, I can place an ad for a creative director position at AKQA and 60 to 70 applicants, and 3 of them will be women. And I was thinking, I was like, wow, what's going on with this? Because I know there's a lot more women out there. And sometimes it might be the language that you use in the job descriptions, using certain phrases. I mean, I know this is more of a tech thing, but like Rockstar Ninja doesn't sound very inclusive. So I'm actually, because she showed me this platform so recently, I didn't have a chance to set this up correctly. So I'm going to run to the back because I wanted to do a demo of this. I am still a guest customer. This isn't a shill for Textio, but I was so incredibly impressed with this, and it was something that I felt like I could take back to my hiring managers and say, hey, maybe we should audit the way we're writing job descriptions because it's not getting the effects and the results that we're looking for.
I also thought it was amazing. Vanessa also shared it with me. And I had just never even really thought about the biases of job descriptions and sort of the language that we use. You kind of think of them as being sort of basic. We want to rewrite ours in terms of being sort of a little bit more interesting, because they're a little basic right now. But there was just a bunch of things that Vanessa brought up, like even sort of bullet points. And like if you have too many bullet points, like women won't apply for qualifications because they want to do all of them. Where like men, will sort of think, if I have 50 to 75% of this, I will apply, where women want to be like 100% plus before they will. So that sort of becomes, discriminatory or sort of exclusionary, because they won't apply because they sort of, okay, I don't have 2 of these. Maybe this isn't for me. But it was really amazing. Like, it's sort of also in terms of like just the words that we use, and when it sort of pulls them out as feminine or masculine, it's kind of incredible, because you just don't really think how that could be sort of exclusionary and not inclusive.
And I also think it's really the executive teams. What we did across our network is we really looked at all of our offices, top executives, to see how many were female, how many women were represented in those upper ranks, because they're the ones who set the tone for the organization. So if we don't have more women leaders and, we don't take the lead in that respect, then it's hard to make it always trickle down to the bottom. We need to have to make sure we have a lot of women executives and women decision makers. And I think that top 20% of the organization is very important to focus on, because that trickles down to the next level and the next level. So if we try to manage everything from middle management point of view, we're still missing the most important people at the top.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you talked about it before, but sort of that you sort of lose these people and then they go out and do their own company because an agency didn't really provide them maybe the flexibility in their new sort of stage.
Exactly.
And we lose them, and then you don't sort of see them go up. And that's about us sort of empowering them once they're in. And
exactly.
There.
It's so important, because, we can't keep bringing the great people in and then they don't feel like that they don't want to stay there, and that first of all, the time and effort, but also, they have to see someone at the top that they can aspire to, and they have to wake up every day and go, I can be X, I can be Y. And if they don't have that in the organization, I mean, they are going to leave. And it's really, a lot of work that just goes into this that ultimately ends up.
Yeah, and I think for us, we have sort of women in head visual design and experience design, and it has showed a great path. But I think we still don't have enough sort of systematic things in place and programs that take care of people in the middle. And it's not just about like, well, look, Chris did it and Chloe did it, but like, okay, how are we helping women, and how, in a deeper sense of the word too, and empowering them and strengthening them.
Exactly.
I grabbed a job description off the AKQA website. And when you put it in there, it highlights words that are negative, positive, masculine, feminine, also repetitive, and it creates a score based on the effectiveness of the job description as well as the tone. And so this one is actually pretty good. It's fairly balanced. I ran this on all sorts of job descriptions all over the place, and some of them definitely lean far more towards the left and some far more towards the right. But it really makes you think about how you're describing these jobs and how you're attracting candidates on the way you present yourself. Vanessa, you said that this was built by someone who has like a PhD in analytics?
By a woman named Kieran, based in Seattle. And so she based it on 60,000 job descriptions and then applied her machine learning algorithms to actually create all the profiles of the words.
So I swear this
is free to try for 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I've got 9 more days.
We wrote all of ours within the 2-week window at an intern, and we just and then signed up after. But it was after we made a case for it, so it can be resourceful.
All right, so I think we have some time for some questions. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes.
I'm Ayuna. I'm a graduate student at Boston University, and I guess we'll include traditionally the diversity candidate. Oh, cheers. But I'm Scottish and obviously require visa sponsorship in order to stay in the US. And I was just wondering how that comes into the conversation, especially at an entry level where I know it's a kind of financial contribution on behalf of the company.
Right. The last 2 places I've worked, AKQA and RGA, it's not an issue. I mean, if you can win the H-1B lottery, fantastic. But,
we love a J1, which is like an intern training visa.
Ask me about OPTs and the O1 and the TN and the H-1B one. Like, the international, I mean, it's never been an issue. Yeah. Yes?
So in my early days of my career, I worked at Ogilvy, I worked on IBM, the global piece of business. And in the room, you had so much, I would say, cognitive diversity or diverse perspectives. You had, an Argentine girl. She just happened to be blonde hair and blue eyes. You had an Australian. We had a Bulgarian, and rich conversation. But how are you guys ensuring that there's ethnic diversity, and there was male and female, so there's a certain kind of diversity that they were achieving, but it still didn't feel like enough. And do you guys feel that too? Do you guys feel like in your organizations it's just not enough, like that cognitive diversity, and what are you doing to it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like that at RGA. I feel like the women are sort of, well represented, and it's a better thing there. I think like people of color and diverse candidates, it's a lot less, and we're really trying to work on that. I think, again, sort of the problem is like-minded people from the same thing, referring the same kind of people, and that's up to us to sort of, I think there's a lot of things we can do, sort of outreach and sort of, partnering with MAPE and partnering with these programs, but also really trying to look for diverse candidates. Like I think at AKQA and RGA are sort of always looking for people, so we're reaching out to a lot of passive candidates, so trying to sort of include that in ours, and then also just then educating hiring managers about, not just sort of like global diversity or cognitive differences, but sort of like a bigger and broader sense of that diversity and trying to bring that into the team.
And there's also need sometimes for socioeconomic diversity. Sometimes living in San Francisco, it feels like an absolute bubble. You just have too many people making way too much money in one small place. And they're not often able to relate to what's going on in the rest of the world or even the rest of the country. And being able to, maybe not go to VCU and not go to SCAD and all those really expensive schools. Hey, maybe we should start recruiting from SF State. Maybe we should start working with community colleges. Maybe we should start working with other places where we can get people that have a different point of view, because that's just as valid as gender diversity or ethnic diversity.
We're also setting a goal around it. I brought it up earlier, but you do what you measure. And then this last year, we changed the schools that we recruit at to include historically black colleges and universities, and women's colleges, and then also local colleges where we have offices, with that exact intention. And then we're actually getting involved more. Jack just spoke at the Platform Conference, which is a big conference down in Atlanta. So we started with campus and kind of expanding it from there.
Yes?
Hi, Carlene Mahana, Manager of Talent Acquisition at Sapient Nitro. I have a comment and then also a question. So my comment is, thank you. I was in theater so I can project.
I will use a microphone and I'll talk softer. I guess my comment is there was some discussion around how do you manage up with the points of contacts for the capabilities that you're hiring for. And I would argue that it's really a case of recruitment not really evolving the recruitment capability, and recruiters really being seen as sort of taskmasters, if you will. Just show me the resumes, show me the portfolios that I want to see, and get the job done. Whereas at Sapient Nitro, what I've learned and what I've experienced there is something completely different. When your hiring managers see you as a business partner, as someone who makes recommendations, as someone who pushes back when they say, I want to see somebody from this particular school, or I want to see somebody but you find the right candidate and it impresses them and they don't have any of the requirements that they were looking for, you then sort of give yourself the cred and the credentials to say, I'm changing the environment, I'm changing the landscape. So I think, there's a lot of taking a step back in recruitment and looking at what we're doing instead of saying, how do I get this hiring manager to do that? Just really, don't ask permission, I guess is what I'm saying, because 9 times out of 10, if you know what you're doing, it's going to really benefit you. And the question I have really is around diversity, being a marketing and advertising professional for over 18 years and doing this job, or this career. I actually love what I do. Diversity is kind of a flavor of the month, right? Now everybody's talking about women. Everything's focused toward women. At one point, it was LGBTQ. Where do we have how do we fit in the full spectrum of diversity, people with disabilities, people from, Asia Pacific, people of, color, people of, everyone. Diversity is more than just gender, as we know. So I'd love to find out from the panelists, what are you doing to look at some of the other groups that fall under the umbrella of diversity, and how is it received if you are doing anything at all? Thanks.
Well, I would say that earlier this year I did a TED Talk called Improve Your Diversity IQ. And it discusses, the different types of diversity, how people define it differently. And diversity is really a reflection of the world through your lens. So it is socioeconomic, it is geographical, it's based on, country of origin, religion, creed. I mean, diversity is difference. And people are comforted by commonality and challenged by diversity. So as an organization, you can't ultimately fill all the diversity requirements all the time and be good at everything. But what you can do is you can open a stage for conversation and build awareness that it's something we need to be conscious of, and then give the options to the general community and see kind of what catches on, and then build small fires. And it goes back to the rules of three. When we start getting a little momentum with some area, we can then grow off that and build off that. But it starts with, transparency. It's about equal pay for men and women. It's about really looking at how your organization operates, and then just opening the floor to begin to watch change happen. So I think that's important to realize that diversity is important for all of our businesses, especially in the creative space. So, and difference will be here well past the fad stage. This will be ongoing, and it's great and exciting to see more companies talk about it, because we all do need to work together. To think that the Civil Rights Act was just passed 50 years ago. So until 50 years ago, you could discriminate on race, creed, whatever. From 1776 until 1965, discrimination was okay in the court of law of the United States of America. We're only 50 years past that, so we must work within our organizations to let people in where they fit in.
Hello? Okay. Can I get a show of hands? Who's responsible for diversity 100% of the time for their job? Okay, awesome. So when we use terms like it's the flavor of the month, it's kind of disrespectful to those of us that actually do this job 100% of the time and have done it for years. Diversity is not the flavor of the month. LGBTQ is not the flavor of the month. My difference is not the flavor of the month. I think we have to learn how to talk better when we talk about diversity, and we also need to talk better when we talk about recruiting. When we say things like, I can't find them, I don't know where they gather, it kind of comes off like you're speaking about an animal on National Geographic, rather than people who want to work at companies and who want a chance to show their talents in a different way. So I think we have to remember that there are people on the other side of this conversation. I don't know why, maybe they know it's me. There are people on the other side of this conversation when we're talking about diversity that are kind of standing back and seeing and hearing these terms and feeling a certain way, because I think we're all here for one purpose, and that's to make our industry better. So I want us to just talk about it a little bit differently. It's no disrespect, but I just wanted to set some ground rules when we are talking about diversity, particularly that there are people on the other end of it, and those individuals are individuals who do this job 100% of the time, have done it for years. I think, just knowing some of my colleagues in this room, if you kind of added up all the years we've been doing it, it probably would add up to like 60, 70 years, to be honest with you. So I just want to set that, and so we can understand. And then also just identify myself as, my name is Tiffany R. Warren. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for Omnicom Group, and many of my colleagues are here. I'm so proud, Doug, that you're representing us. And then also my colleagues from IPG as well as Publicis are here as well, and we're here because we're in support of making this a better industry, not only for women, but of all people from all colors, all backgrounds.
If I can I add one thing really quick? One the best quote I've heard related to diversity, which like people instantly get it, is diversity is inviting people to the party, and inclusion is inviting them to dance at the party. And that makes sense for a lot of people, but it's actually like bringing people and then making them feel the full self and like being part of it. And it's not just a temporary thing.
Hello. Yes. Hi, my name is Rosa Nunez, and I am the head of diversity for Omnicom Media Group. And I do have a quick question. So, as many of you, our industry, my company is doing an amazing job recruiting the best possible talent. We have casted a broader net. We go to places that we haven't gone before. However, we face a roadblock when we present these candidates to our hiring managers. And something that Vanessa said is about unconscious bias. What kind of best practices do you have on pushing back or getting that candidate through when you have perceptions coming from the hiring manager telling you, well, that's not what we're looking for, the name sounds weird, that school is not really well recognized? How do you get that candidate through the pipeline?
Good question. That's like an individual by individual case. What we're doing is rolling out the training for everyone, and we're doing it with the support from the top. So Jack, our CEO, and our whole executive team is on board with that, and then kind of rolling it through the company. It can't come from HR. It's hard just to push it from HR and from the recruiters. You need the case for it, and you need the support from the top. And so you can attack the problem like one by one, but really it's like a systematic problem that needs to be addressed throughout the organization.
Abby?
Hi. So my question is, I know this is about recruiting, but we also talked about having someone already there that someone can see and kind of aspire to be. And getting past, the hiring managers and the bias, how much of the conversation is about the career path once the person is in? So we can think about, you work so hard to get out there and find the right people and get them in, but how do you make sure that that they feel included, that they stay challenged, and that they have a career path? And I'm curious too how much that kind of influences the conversation with the hiring managers in the process.
I'd say at RJ, I think that's one of our biggest disconnects. It's sort of, I think you sort of have that conversation before, and then we're 800 people in New York, and we're super busy, and it's, people get sort of lost in the shuffle. A lot of people get lost in the shuffle, and I think that's something that we're working with HR and a lot closer to sort of really try to sort of systematically get programs for everybody to help empower them and grow them while they're there. I try to bring up sort of certain examples of that with candidates, but I do feel like we can do a lot better in that sense.
Oh, well, I was actually going to say, maybe Corinne would say a few words. She heads up our HR Media Arts Lab about how you keep employees engaged to their career path. Would you want to? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Approach HR is that it's a holistic perspective where you start from the first day that someone comes in for an interview to the last day. So my HR team, recruitment is part of HR, talent dev is part of HR, diversity is part of HR, so that there is a holistic view, and so I can be seeing all of that and making sure that we're hitting all the touch points. But I also think it is about building relationships. It's about sending less emails, walking around, connecting with people. That's how you earn credibility. That's why when I can go and say, you need to hire this person, this experience, they're going to listen to me because they know that I've been really thoughtful and I'm not just trying to check my boxes. And I think that's what maintains culture, and I think it's what encourages diversity. And at Mal, we have, Doug knows the stats better than me, I think, but we have 49, 51%, women in leadership, and we also pay our men and women the same across every role, across every department. And I think it is about a major commitment to doing that, but I think it's a care. Our product is our talent. So if we don't take HR seriously and see HR as a strategic partner, then, it's always going to kind of fall by the wayside. So.
Okay,
yeah.
Sure.
I'm Sandra Sims-Williams. I'm Chief Diversity Officer for Publicis Group, and I'm going to back up my sister Tiffany on two areas. First of all, when we started diversity for Publicis Group, it wasn't about recruiting, because we needed to look at the people we have and understand where they are. because the waters are troubled before we even pull people into these environments. So we needed to deal with that and understand that managers are not ready. You need to prepare managers for a diverse workforce. And on top of that, I don't want to be too heavy on recruiters, but I do want to engage recruiters to know that there is a different way to recruit people of diverse backgrounds, and that you need to understand where they come from and how to actually market them to your hiring managers. So we did a session called Inclusive Recruiting, because our headsets do have to change. And when we do say we can't find them, they are there. We just have to make sure that when we bring them in, our environments are ready to really engage.
I'd like to follow up on that and say that was very insightful and so true. Hello? I'm Madeline Clark, and I do senior level recruiting. I'm based in San Francisco. A lot of what you've talked about today has addressed the mid-level and the entry-level candidates, and thank you for the Textio. That's something I'll definitely take a look at. But when I recruit, I pretty much crowbar people out of wherever they are to move them somewhere else. And I know that almost none of them are looking for a job at the time. With diversity candidates, it's even more so. So what's the difference? My question is, what's the difference in the way that you recruit for mid and junior level people by, calling them in versus specifically going after the candidates you want at the senior levels?
I mean, I would say at RGA, we're, probably 90% of sort of senior level we're going out and finding. So we'll often sort of work with the hiring managers and sort of pool, these are sort of the profiles, these are the people. I think I consider it important for sort of women and diverse candidates. So I'm trying to make sure that in all of the sourcing I'm doing, I'm sort of finding all of those people and including them in this bucket, and then sort of trying to reach out to them, and then trying to also then, it's an individual business. Like what you want is going to be different than what Leslie wants, and trying to really understand and chat with candidates about what they're interested in and what they want for their next step, and how, if that matches up at RJ or if it doesn't. But trying to sort of include a lot more in the pool, which I think is a little bit easier sometimes when we're looking for passive candidates, because they are out there. I think some companies rely much more on people applying to them, and so that can be really limiting. But I think on the senior level, we're always sort of going out and finding them as well.
I know our best recruiter is Jack, our CEO. He hired a 40% diverse executive team. And then from there, that entire group is super invested and involved. And so we're kind of moving down from there. So if you were to do one thing, it would be to engage your CEO or senior staff in the ambassadors conversation, if it's not diverse. And then working with them to give them the resources to do the reach outs, coaching them on how to actually get involved and recruit diversity under them.
Great. One last question, because we actually have to wrap up.
Yeah. And I would also say next year at 3%, every one here has to bring an ambassador from their agency to come with them. I know we're wrapping, but LinkedIn, you should probably just link us all in here. I'm sure I'm just plugging all of our LinkedIn. But I would love to connect. I'm sure we all would, to just keep the conversation going offline.
All right.
Definitely.
No, thank you so much. You guys have been an incredibly spirited audience. I had this nightmare that no one was going to show up, and I'm so happy that you guys are all here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.